this video, I'm going to talk about why and how you should get to know yourself. We could call it self-curiosity, or more technically, we could call it intrapersonal curiosity. Hello, my name is Michael Dewan-Herrick. I'm a psychotherapist and a life coach with over 40 years of experience in helping people to understand themselves and to create the lives that they desire. This all began very early in my life when I seemed to have an inexhaustible curiosity about people, what made people tick. And one of the earlier ways that I explored this was in my undergraduate work in cultural anthropology, where I was interested in the difference between older indigenous cultures and more modern cultures. Eventually, this led to being curious about psychology, about what made individuals tick. And this then overlapped with a curiosity about myself, what made me tick. Why did I have the thoughts and feelings and behaviors that I had? How could I make sense of myself? What did I want with my life? I'm telling you this because self-curiosity or intrapersonal curiosity is not a peripheral thing for me. It's not something that I tack on to more fundamental things. It's fundamental. It's been with me my whole life, and it's at the foundation of what I do. For me, it's at the heart of self-development, and it persists through life. It's a journey that never ends. Originally, the idea to do a video on the topic of curiosity came to me as I was reading a book by Ian Leslie titled simply Curiosity. It's a great book. I recommend it. I'll leave a link in the notes below. But as I read through it, I began to realize how big a topic it was and that I couldn't cover it in a simple video. What I also noticed by the time I got to the end of it is that if I was to narrow it down, I was going to narrow it down to self-curiosity, but Ian Leslie made no mention of this, which was a bit disappointing. But I did go on and find some research papers and see that this has been a topic that's been studied and things have been discovered about it. And later on in the video, I will make reference to some of my findings in these research papers. Okay, let's dive in. First, what is curiosity? Or more particularly, what is intrapersonal curiosity? Curiosity, simply stated, is the desire to learn. Intrapersonal curiosity is the desire to learn about oneself. I would add that this is preceded by a recognition of one's ignorance. In the case of self-curiosity, it's recognizing that we don't know things about ourselves. If you believe you already know everything worth knowing about yourself, you're not likely to be curious. In fact, you're probably not watching this video. Additionally, if you're afraid of what you might discover if you're curious about yourself, you also may not be curious. I don't believe that anybody knows everything worth knowing about themselves, and not least of which of the reasons for that is that we change over time. We grow, we develop, and we need to update our knowledge about who we are and what's important to us. To say a little bit more about curiosity before we move on, I want to borrow from Ian Leslie's book, Curiosity, where he identifies two kinds of curiosity. One he calls diversive, and the other he calls epistemic. Diversive curiosity he describes as a kind of seeking out of novel, stimulating information. It might be the kind of thing that drives us to binge watch YouTube shorts. It has a feeling of entertainment and excitement, and that can be fine. It has its uses. The other one, though, is called epistemic, which is about gaining real knowledge. And epistemic curiosity is a kind of curiosity that's sustained over time. It's a true study of something, going deeper and wider in our understanding of a particular thing that we have an interest in. Epistemic curiosity doesn't feel like entertainment. So I have a question for you. Which of these two kinds of curiosity prompted you to click on this video and start watching it? I'm going to guess that if it was diversive curiosity, You may not be with me still. You may have left. If it was epistemic curiosity, perhaps you've stuck along and will stay with me to the end because you really want to know something. You're curious about what self-curiosity is and how you can do it, and you're willing to put in the time. Okay, so why bother with epistemic, intrapersonal curiosity? Well, if I put it like that, it might sound like you'd have to be a top-level nerd in order to go for it. So let's put it this way. What can you get out of being curious about yourself? That's what I'm going to talk about now. Okay, so according to the research that I've cited earlier, the benefits of intrapersonal curiosity can be listed like this, and I'm going to read some of these. I will leave links below for some of these research papers in case you want to look into it yourself. But here's the benefits that have been found when they actually talk to people and see of the people who are curious about themselves, how does it make their lives better? They say, understanding one's thoughts, feelings, and behavior increases self-awareness, which leads to better decision-making, more fulfilling relationships, and greater emotional intelligence. It enhances emotional regulation, so there's more awareness of emotional triggers as well as the strategies that work for each person for managing those emotions. It increases creativity. It helps with generating new ideas and perspectives and insights, which can be applied to creative projects and problem solving. It gives greater resilience. In other words, when we're curious about our reactions to stress and challenges, we're better equipped to cope with and bounce back from setbacks. And generally, it's shown that there's improved personal growth. It makes us aware of areas for improvement and allows us to set goals. It makes us more aware of our strengths and our weaknesses. There are no doubt other benefits. I could list many, I'm sure, but hopefully this is enough to demonstrate that it's worthwhile. That while it might be scary, while it might be difficult, there's something to be gained by being curious about ourselves, by learning about who we are and how we are made and what drives our behavior. Before I talk about how we can be curious about ourselves, I want to point out a fundamental shift that happens when we decide to be curious about ourselves. We turn the subject of our experience into the object of our awareness. We become aware of our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviors in a way that allows us to ask questions about them, to evaluate whether these things are true and effective. It puts us in a better position to have option. Instead of simply acting unconsciously out of habit, we can deliberately decide how we're going to be. This is a miraculous capacity, and it's at the root of our development and our growth. It's what drives it and makes it possible. Having already said a bit about what curiosity is, in particular what intrapersonal curiosity is, I want to talk about what the self is. What is it that we're going to be curious about? And like in many of my videos, I'm going to frame this in 4 areas that I think constitute ourselves, involve ourselves. We're embedded in these 4 things, and our curiosity can be extended to all 4 of these areas. And I name them this way: the body, the mind, relationships, and environment. We can be curious about and aware of ourselves in all 4 of these areas. We can turn our attention to them and ask certain questions. I don't like reading from a script, but to be honest, it's hard to memorize all of these things and then tell you. So I'm going to look down at my notes here, and I'm going to share some of the questions that I've come up with for these 4 areas. In terms of the body, how do I feel in my body? And that's at any given moment. Where am I holding tension in my body? What does my body need? What am I doing and why am I doing it? This is more about our behavior than just our body and the sensations that we have in it. How can I take better care of my body? For instance, how's my diet? Do I exercise enough? Do I sleep well? And what are my physical limitations? Are there things that I shouldn't do because I might injure myself? Are there thresholds where I can stretch myself to? We have to be curious. We have to sense into and feel our bodies and ask ourselves these questions. Okay, here's some questions for the mind. What do I think and believe about myself, other people, and the world? How has my personal history of experience contributed to my way of thinking, to my beliefs about myself, others, and the world? Are there things that I have long believed that just might not be true? What do I know about myself and what am I ignorant of? What triggers my emotions, both positive and negative? How does my thinking influence my emotions? What are my values, and to what degree do I live by them? What do I care about? How would I describe my moral compass? What is my vision for who I want to be and how I want to live? And here are some questions in the area of relationships. What do I need in my various kinds of relationships? What responsibilities do I have in relationships with others, and am I fulfilling them? How do I handle conflict, and could I do better at this? How? Do I speak my truth or withhold it? How good am I at communicating, and how could I do better? Do I keep my agreements and my promises? Can I set boundaries? Can I ask for what I want? How do I ask for what I want? Do I ever resort to manipulation or deception? What do I want to do about that? And last but not least, the environment. Some questions we can ask ourselves about how we are in our environment. Am I happy and comfortable in my home and work environments? If not, what would make them better? Where am I most relaxed and at peace? Where am I positively stimulated? What environments make me feel bad, and why? Am I actively engaged in creating and maintaining my home environment? What impact do I feel either way? In other words, if you are attending to your home environment, how do you feel about that? If you're not, how do you feel about that? And here are some additional questions we can ask of ourselves that apply to all four areas. Generally, we can ask, what are my strengths and weaknesses? What are my vulnerabilities? How does the condition of each of these four areas separately affect and impact the others? Of course, this is just a sampling of possibilities, a sampling of what to me seem to be key questions that we can ask ourselves. But I'm sure you can come up with many more, and maybe some that are more tailored to your particular life and what's important for you to pay attention to. So I've given some idea of why you should bother, what there is to be gained from being curious about yourself, and I've suggested the areas that you can ask these questions about. You may still have the question, so how do I go about this? How do I ask these questions? Again, let's remember, we're talking about epistemic curiosity. So it's something that's sustained. And I would propose that this is not something that you do over a weekend and get it done. This is something that becomes a part of your life, becomes part of how you navigate the world, the days, the weeks, the years ahead. In that sense, that I think it's important to set aside some time to actually make a space and a time for it. And you can ask these questions mentally. You might write them down and, to remember what they are, and then you might pick one on a day and make that the one you think about that day, or you may pick several and think about them and kind of do it simply mentally. You're just sitting quietly, alone, hopefully in a room where you're not distracted, where you can just introspect and take that time. Another way that people do it, and for me, a primary tool over most my life since I was a teenager, I've kept a journal. And this has been part of what that journal has been about. It's about being curious about my experience and who I am. So you can write it down. You could even create a self-curiosity journal and pose yourself questions and then write about the questions. Come up with your own answers. And that's the thing. You ask yourself questions, then you go, well, God, I don't know. Don't stop there. Don't just say, I don't know. Think about it. It may take some time to begin to generate some answers. And it's not like you have to nail it right off the bat. You speculate. You come up with some ideas, your best guesses at what might be true for you. And you begin to generate a picture of yourself in your mind. You begin to generate some familiarity. It may change over time. It may get more detailed. But the point is that you ask the question, and you try to answer it as best you can, either mentally or in writing. Another thing that people do, I've made my living, as I've said, out of being a therapist and a life coach. So people come to me, and this is part of what we do together. So you can also go into therapy or life coaching and begin to explore these questions there. As an alternative to a written journal, you could keep an audio journal. Something that I've done in more recent time is to keep a video journal where I talk to camera. And that can be interesting because if you write it, you can read it again. If you audio record it, you can listen to it again. If you video it, you can watch it. And as you hear yourself or see yourself expressing things, again, you're turning subject into object, right? You're able to get a little bit of a distance and get some insight. I think it's important to recognize that curiosity about ourselves is not the same as curiosity about things like physics and chemistry and biology and history that are subjects that you just study external to yourself. When we're being curious about ourselves, we're a work in process, and we get to decide to some degree who we're going to be, how we're going to behave. We're not a static object that we just study like a butterfly pinned to a board. Our self-knowledge will lead to us having more options, and we get to make decisions about who we're going to be, and we'll grow and change over time. Some of the things we learn about ourselves, if we're not happy with them, we can change them. Some of the things we'll learn we may not be able to change. But even in the case in which we can't change those things, we can decide how we're going to deal with them, how much time we'll spend worrying about them, how we'll cope with them. So even when we can't change things about ourselves, we can make some choices that mediate how big an impact it will have on our lives. There's always more to say, but I've shared the essence of what I intended to offer. Thanks for sticking with me to the end, and I hope that I've been persuasive and inspired you to lean in to getting to know yourself as well as you can. It's a difficult task, and inevitably will reveal things that we don't want to know about ourselves. As you get curious about yourself and ask questions and generate answers to those questions, it will become clear to you the value of that knowledge and how you can use it in your life. At first, it may not be obvious. It might require some faith. But if you stick to it, in time, it'll be clear. In time, there will be benefits that you hadn't imagined or expected. So, yes, stick with it, and good luck with it. That's it for now. Until next time, be well and take care. Bye-bye.